Hello, this is Blaine Gray here, Plastering for Beginners. In today's video I'm going to show you an effective way to renovate your home. I'll show you how to turn your old walls into fresh looking plaster and that's through replastering. I'll walk you through the full process on how to replaster the walls in your house. And this video will go from wallpaper to fresh plaster and we'll show you everything in between. Show you how to fill the walls ready for plastering, show you how to prepare them, and then we'll show a complete beginner's guide on how to plaster walls for yourself. Whether you ever done it before or you haven't, this is a guide for anyone who's looking to renovate their homes and transform their old walls into new looking pieces of art. Okay, so the first thing we did in this room was we stripped the wallpaper. That's my sister there, stripping it back, and all we used was water and a scraper. Don't use anything else. And then what we were left with was a bare wall. Now the process that follows after this, we're going to go into how to prepare this wall ready for plastering and walk you through the full process. What we do need to do is prepare the walls ready for when they finish plaster. So we've got a few areas where we've got a few potholes. There might be a crack up there, might have to dig that out and replant it. But basically what we're going to do is just fill these deeper areas first. Got this to deal with, a bit of a plug face, it's just been badly filled in. So what I've got to do is scrape back any high spots and then fill it. So we've got to use an undercoat plaster. So we do that first, we're filling any blown areas that was hiding under the wallpaper. And then we've got to prepare the wall. So we'll show you exactly how to do that before we start plastering. So here's what we need. We've got Thistle undercoat plaster. You can either use this or British gypsum bonding. This is an English product. But to prime the walls, we're going to need this. We've got some PVA. Brand wise, I usually go for Evo stick, but I've just got the no nonsense stuff because I didn't have that in stock. But PVA wise, doesn't really matter what you buy. PVA is PVA. So we're going to prime the walls first. Going to PVA the walls, and then we're going to apply the undercoat plaster to the areas that need it. So in terms of mixes, we need mixed together 3 parts water to 1 part PVA. You literally put it in a bucket. You don't have to measure it out accurately, but as best as you can, basically 3 parts water, 1 part PVA mixed in a bucket, mixed together so it's a nice even consistency. And then all you do is just apply it to the walls. If you want to be extra cautious, if you've got walls that are a bit porous, you can apply 2 coats of PVA. First one is 5 parts water, 1 PVA. Wait for that to dry and then apply another coat of PVA, 3 parts water, 1 part PVA. This just makes sure that you've got a real secure bond to the wall. Looking at the state of this, these walls don't look too porous. So I'm just going to go for the 1 coat, 3 parts water, 1 part PVA. So mix it in the bucket and then we're just going to whack it on. Now one final thing before we start, what we want to do is address any cracks that are in the wall existing. So for example, we have this where the corners of the room meet. We've got a crack running down there. And what you want to do is apply this. This is fiberglass scrim tape. And what you do is you apply this. This is sticky, so it's got it's self-adhesive. So what you do is you just line it along the crack and you just place it. What this will do is allow an extra layer of security. So if the building does move, this should keep the plaster together and stop it from cracking with the building. So if you've got any cracks on your wall, any areas that look a bit dodgy, I'm going to put a bit of scrim tape around this as well. Apply your scrim tape directly to the wall and then your PVA over it. You don't want to do it the other way around. The scrim tape doesn't like to stick to wet PVA. So apply this first and then PVA the wall. So here's a quick tip. You've got to wait for the PVA to dry before you do anything else. I've had to get a new trowel because, like I said, I've come away and I'm going to help my sister plaster a room. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't even have any clothes, so I've had to buy some new tools. Quick tip. Get some fine sanding paper and then the edges of your trowel, give it a sand. Because no trowels are actually perfectly ready for plastering. You always get the machine edge that shows. Grind it down with a bit of fine sandpaper. Do that whilst you're waiting for this PVA to dry, because if you are new and you've got a brand new trowel, do it. it'll make your work so much better. So do this with all your trowels you own. Okay, so the PVA's dried. It's time to mix the undercoat plaster. This comes in powder form, and the way you do it is water in the bucket first, slowly add the powder until you get a nice thick consistency. It actually has instructions on the back for how much water to plaster ratio. What we're looking for is a thicker consistency so it's easier to fill in any low spots of the wall. So I'm going to mix it up right now. I've got water ready in a bucket, mix it up and I'll show you how to apply it. Okay, so I'm going to scoop a bit of undercoat plaster onto the hawk. This is a perfect way to start practicing using your trowel because this is a thicker product. It's going to be easier to learn with compared to the finer finished plaster which we're going to go into later on in the video. Like I said, this is an undercoat plaster, so it's thicker and it's a bit easier to use if you're starting out. So we've got a section here which was the main reason we mixed it up. It was a big crack running down. Basically the plaster had blown. So take plaster, blob it in there, take off the excess, make sure the scrim tape don't come unloose, and then flatten it off with your trowel. So that is, at this moment in time, literally all we're doing. We're just filling in the majority of the hole. You don't have to worry about it getting it smooth. Don't worry about that. Just get it so you've got most of the trowel lines out. Smooth it over your trowel, getting rid of the high spots or excess plaster. Take it, rub it off into the hawk, job done. Worry about the rest after. And what I'm doing here is an area where the wall isn't quite level, so you can also use this plaster to level it off. There's a bit of a dip. Use your undercoat plaster to fill in any low areas. Again, using your trowel. Okay, so the bondage dried. Now once bondage dried, you want to put a PVA, coat of PVA onto it, allow that to dry, and then you're ready for plastering. So now we're ready to mix. I'm going to show you a quick guide on how to mix plaster, talk about ratios in terms of how much water you need per bucket and per bag of plaster. I'm going to show you that right now from another clip I've done in another video. It's not complicated, it's just knowing how many litres of water you need to one bag of plaster. From there I'm just going to go straight into plastering this wall, so let's do it. Okay, so this is what we're going to be using for the plastering. We've got one big mixing bucket, keep this nice and clean. This is what we're doing, mixing all our finished product, which is this. This is British Gypsum Multi-Finish, and this is what we're going to be using for our plastering today. You can also buy board finish, which is also by British Gypsum, which is a finished plaster, which is fine, it's good to use. I'm just going to be using this today. So they're the options you've got. I'll be using a hawk, or some people call it handboard. Got this, which is a bucket trowel. This is what we use to scoop the plaster onto the hawk. Got a trowel, 14 inch. And then we'll need 2 clean water buckets. This is what we'll be carrying the water into. And this, 1 dirty bucket. This is what we'll be cleaning our tools with, cleaning the equipment with. So I'm also using this electric mixer. I highly advise you get a mixer just because to hand mix any plaster, it'd end up clumpy, it's hard to use. And generally the best way to plaster is with a smooth, consistent mix. You can buy these quite cheap, to be honest. I think you can get them from £40 to £80. Have a good look around, or if worse comes to worse, you can use an old drill with a head on, interchangeable head, say an SDS drill, or you could even hire one. But generally try and use a decent mixer for your mix, it's worth it. So always use clean water when you're mixing the plaster. I've got a bucket of clean water here, and always make sure your bucket's nice and clean. Give it a swill around, give it a little brush, I've already done that, and just make sure you're cleaning with mixing with clean conditions. So what you do, so I've got a full bag of plaster. For a full bag of plaster we'll need 12.5 litres of water, roughly. So you pour your water in first. Don't pour all the bag in at once. Do it in sections. Helps keep it mixed nice, smooth, and stops it doing too much on the drill. Now the good thing to do is take your bucket trowel, again make sure it's clean, scrape the edges. Take your mixer, give it a tap. And then you just need to clean this with your cleaning bucket, and that's it. Okay, so a quick talk on the consistency. Obviously, you don't want it too sloppy, yet you don't want it too thick. As you can see, when you put it on your trowel, it sits, it doesn't fall off the edge. You know, it's not too thick where it's too hard to put on the wall, yet it's not too sloppy where it's streaming everywhere. This is exactly what you want. A bit like Angel Delight, the chocolate one. Look at that, it looks lovely. That's how you want it. Okay, before we start, I just want to get a few things out of the way. When you're plastering, you always start at the top first. So I've done the top section of the wall, and here's the other rule of thumb. If you're right-handed, you work left to right. If you're left-handed, you work right to left. And that's because when you're working against yourself, say if I've got the trowel in my right hand, I'll catch anything that falls in the left hand with my hook or my handboard. So that's first rule of thumb. What I'm going to do now is walk you through the whole process on how to plaster a wall. There's roughly 7 steps that I'm going to show you today. And within that I'm going to go into detail on each part. But for now the first stage is just applying plaster to the wall. So take your trowel, got your plaster, starting from the left side of the wall, you come in. So put the plaster on my hook, a few scoops, and take the plaster off your trowel, and then you go in. Again, left side of the wall. So at the moment, we're going to put the left side of a trowel to the left side of the wall. And that's where you want the plaster to be, on the left side of your trowel. That's where we're going to aim to get it. And bring it in, come across. So get that section done. Now at this stage, don't worry if there's any ripples or lines in the plaster. We've got plenty of time to get that out. People think that you just apply plaster to the wall and then that's it, you've got one chance. It's not true. We're just applying the plaster. Don't worry about lines, don't worry about ripples. Don't worry if there's any marks showing, that's fine. We just want to get the first coat of plaster on. So, keep loading up. Okay, we've got the left side of the wall on. Now we're going to do it a bit differently. Instead of troweling from the left side, we're going to start troweling upwards. So again, you still want the plaster on the same mark, the left side of the trowel, but let me show you how it works now. Take the plaster, then you take the plaster off your hook, and then you come up. So instead of troweling left to right, try and vertically now. All the way up, come back on yourself, and then trowel back any lines. And that's how you get the plaster on the wall. Now working vertically. So you take the plaster from the hook, now there's a few lines at the top where I'm meeting into the top half of the plaster. Again, don't worry about that. We just want to get the plaster on at this stage. So again, I'll show you one more time. Load your plaster up. Get a bit more there. Okay, now we've come to the right side of the wall. Now we're going to pull the plaster from the right side and pull it in. It's the same motion as before. Take the plaster, right side, pull it in. So now we want the plaster on the right side of the trowel. And then we're going to direct that to the right side of the wall and work horizontally. Like so. Now, that's your first coat of plaster on the wall. Again, don't worry about any ripples, don't worry about any lines. We're going to go with that into a minute. So you apply your first coat of plaster. Now I'm going to do the same on this wall. If you're a beginner, just do one wall at a time. But I'm going to go into the next stage now. That's stage 1, applying your first coat. Okay, so the plaster's on the wall. Now what we're going to do is quickly give that first coat a little flatten. Again, you don't need too crazy about it, but we just want to take out the little ripples or the lines that were left before. After this, we are going to apply another coat of plaster. The reason we flatten it first is because if that dries through with the ridges showing, it might show through the second coat of plaster, leaving bumps and lumps. So, keeping your trowel quite close to the wall, just gently glide across. Taking out any lines. And the trick is you want to keep your trowel close to the wall. And just taking anything out. Again, coming up as well. We're just copying the same motions what we were doing before without adding the plaster. So, I'm coming up, troweling any lines out. Now again, you don't have to worry too much about this. We're going to put another coat of plaster onto it. And you've got so much time, as you'll see in this video, to get it right. Just get the lines out, don't worry. Let's start from right. Okay, so once that's flattened, you want to get rid of any mess, clean up your tools, and we're going to mix up a new batch of plaster. Now there's the difference. The second coat usually uses half the amount of plaster to the first coat. So you don't want to mix as much as before, but your good rule of thumb, mix a new batch of plaster for the second coat. It just makes life so much easier. So I'm going to get this cleaned and get a new coat on. Let's do it. I've treated me to cheese, tomato toasty with a cup of tea. So when you know you've got a good one. So let's carry on. I'm going to have a little snack and then we're going to move on to the next stage. Okay, so we've got the top half of the wall plastered. We're going to go the second coat. Just want to get a bit closer so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Scooping the plaster from the hook and then coming in to the left. As you can see, my trowel's quite close. I've never got an open trowel. Got to keep the trowel close to the wall. And then what we're doing is, as we're coming in, we're slowly pivoting the trowel closer and closer. And that's what disperses the plaster to the wall. So, as I'm coming, I'm consciously tilting the plaster closer to the wall. And by the end, the plaster's gone. So, and then come back on yourself, give it a flatten. Again, very close. You never open trowel because if you have an open trowel, you'll just pull the plaster off. You want it nice and close, tucked in. So, again, filling in any spots now that we missed from the first coat. working on the corners, taking your time on the internal corners as well, just coming in and starting to fill it even more. The reason we put 2 coats of plaster on is if there's any low spots after the first, at least you can fill it with the second. So that's that way, and now I'm going to go vertically and take you close up on that. So the problem with the vertical is you've got a lot more plaster disperse, and because you've got a longer sweep. With the left and the tops you only have a short distance. With the verticals you've got quite a way to go. So come all the way to the bottom and come all the way up. And then what I like to do is come back, trowel out the lines behind myself, try and get it flat as I go. And then again, take the plaster right at the bottom, tilting my trowel closer to the wall. By that point I'm virtually flat, and that's because all the plaster's onto the wall at that point. Come back, trowel lines out, come back on myself, try and get it flat as I go. So, show you one more time, come to the bottom, and then as you can see, slow motion, that trowel's getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until all the plaster's gone, and when the plaster's gone, you can trowel it flat. So, one more time, use up the plaster. Going closer. And then there we go. Coming back, troweling out anything I've left behind. So that's a close-up guide on how to apply plaster. I'm going to complete this wall now, apply the second coat, and then we're going to continue on to the next stage. I've cleaned up. We're going to get rid of this now. We don't need this mixing bucket, we don't need the hawk, we don't need the bucket trowel. We're done with that. So I have 2 buckets, one for cleaning up with, one for the clean water which you're going to use later on in the process of plastering. But for now, these can go. Get them out of the room. We don't need them anymore. Now our job is we're going to continue to flatten these walls. The rest of the process is fairly repetitive. Actually, let's be honest, plastering is repetitive. To get better at plastering, you've just got to keep doing it more and more and more. It's very simple motions, but it takes time to perfect because your body's not used to it. But in time, your hand and your trowel will be like an extension of yourself. You'll feel your trowel and it'll be very natural to use it. Don't feel bad if at this stage everything feels clunky and everything's hard. I've been doing this for about 14 years now. Don't compare yourself to me. I'm not saying I'm the best, but I've been doing it for a longer time, which means it's a bit easier. For a beginner, for anyone who's starting out, this will be hard because you're just not used to doing it. But here's the process and here's the secret to mastering plastering. Just do it all the time. And that is it. It's very simple motions and very repetitive. There's not much to it. It's just keep doing it over and over again until your body learns to do them motions with your trowel and hook. So that's the big tip I can say for anyone who wants to start plastering professionally. But for now, let's carry on. Get rid of these buckets. Keep your water buckets. We're going to be using them, but we're just going to flatten. Okay, so now what we're doing is just continuing to flatten. So I've already done the top half. Like I said, it's very repetitive. We're keeping the same order. Start at the top left, work across, come to the bottom left, work across. That's because I'm right-handed. It's very repetitive and you want to keep doing the same thing so your body gets used to the same motions. But what I'm going to do, now we're just flattening any ripples out. Let me show you what I mean. See, we've got a few of these now. And you can actually see in the light that we've got a few ridges, a few bumps. So what we're going to be doing is bringing them out. So what we're doing now is we're troweling the wall flatter and flatter. Let me put you back so I can show you what I mean. So starting in the left, coming up where you left off, keeping your trowel close to the wall, just getting them lines out. Very, very close to the wall. You want your trowel close. You don't want it tilted open like I said before. If you have an open trowel, you're going to scrape all the plaster off. Keep the trowel close to the wall and you're putting pressure behind it. You're actually pushing into your trowel and then keeping that rigid stance, rigid grip. You're literally forcing the ripples and the lines out of the plaster. If you just go lightly, you're just going to follow the ridges. It's not going to do anything. You need pressure, lots of pressure. And what I like to do is come as far across as possible. And what we're doing, if we collect any, you see my trowel, this is called fat. This is excess plaster. What you want to do is you see any loose holes, or if you see any pits, again I'll show you one so you can see what I mean. See this section here, little hole. Take the excess plaster, you can see I've left a line of plaster there. Fill it, again there. The idea at this stage is to not only flatten, we also want to fill. If you don't fill at this stage, the plaster will dry and you'll be finding it harder and harder to collect that loose plaster off your trowel. So we're troweling and we're filling as we go. Now we're doing the same, but we're going vertically. So we did it horizontally, and then troweling out any lines, just pushing in, and we're just keeping that wall nice and tidy. What we're doing is just getting rid of them lines. Any holes, got a low spot there, low spot there. So plaster doesn't flatten itself, you've got to really work at it, you've got to push them lines out of it. At this stage, the plaster's still quite wet, it's got a lot of movement, you can manipulate the lines, you can manipulate the plaster and its shape. As time goes on, is what I'm going to go into in the next few steps, gets a bit harder. So I'm going to complete the rest of this wall, get the lines out, fill in any holes, and then we're going to move forward. So that is stage 4. Quick tip. This is why I don't like buying the flexi tubs, because what you get is plaster, and the rubber from the bucket goes into the plaster. If you're gonna buy a bucket, I've just got this because I'm here for I'm on a holiday actually, shouldn't be plastering, just helping my sister, so I had to get a load of new tools, didn't want to spend a lot of money. If you are gonna do it, get the proper mixing plastering tubs, not the flexi ones. The plastering tub's a lot harder, it's a harder plastic, it's less likely you're going to break it and put it into your plaster. Flexis I use for backing plasters like bonding, don't use them for finish. It's a good tip. Okay, moving on. At this point we're going to use this. This is a water brush. This is a 6-inch water brush. You can get a proper plasterer's one. Again, I bought cheap from B&Q, and this is perfect for anyone else who's going to be doing the same thing for the first time. I think this was £7.5 quid or something. 150 millimetre brush. So this is 6-inch, and this is perfect because it'll hold a lot of water, and it'll hold a lot of water. And the reason we're going to do it is because this plaster is drying. As the plaster dries, it starts to get harder and harder to flatten, and that's because it's getting harder as a product. It's strengthening, it's binding together, and it's starting to materialise. So we need water to bring it back a little bit. So again, it's going to start in the top left, apply a bit of water to your edges, internal edges there, not loads, and then trowel in. And what you'll find now is the water is going to help it glide a bit more, it's going to take it a bit further. So we're coming in. If you didn't use this, one of two things might happen. It might tear the plaster, or it might just be harder to flatten. Now either way, water just helps you on your mission to get this wall flat as you go. So I believe at this stage it's a must. So, coming in. And what we're doing now is we're really starting to flatten it. But again, same motions, that's what's saying about repetition. Close to the wall, fixed, rigid grip, a lot of pressure, but we're doing the same movements. Nothing's changed, nothing at all. Okay, now we're going to go vertically. Putting water at the bottoms this time, coming all the way up. I only need a little bit of water. As you can see now, we're getting the wall flatter and flatter and flatter. Same motions, just going vertically, and then taking any ridges out of the plaster, real firm grip, pushing it into the plaster as we go. Because you might not see it, but there will be ridges in the plaster. And the reason you keep going over it is to get it flatter and flatter. You've got to think, at the beginning we were trying to put a liquid based product on the wall. It doesn't, what's the baby? Doesn't work. Okay, this is the second to last stage of plastering, and this is probably one of the easiest stages. Everything you've done so far has put the groundwork in for this point. The wall should be flat, the areas should be filled, should be smooth-ish. All we're going to do now on this stage is just polish the plaster. It's just to give it that final touch, give it that smooth finish and get rid of any final lines or fine ripples that might be in the plaster. But again, it's mainly to polish it up. So now, remember that clean bucket of water we had before? We want to get that out, and our water brush, and this is where we use a flexi trowel. Now you do not need a flexi trowel. This is a recently new addition to the plastering world. Not every old school plasterer even knew what this was. This wasn't invented. But this is just basically, at this point it's nice to use a trowel with a bit of flexibility in it. So it's not as harsh on the joints. And it just brings out the polished plaster look a bit more better. It just makes it look a bit nicer. Again, you can just keep using the traditional base trowel that you've had throughout this whole stage. But for me, I like to finish with a flexi trowel. So this is called the wet trowel. And what we do is grab your water brush, again left to right, come all the way across. And then we're cross troweling. So we're going to come across. So that is called a cross trowel, and that's because we're going across the plaster rather than up and vertically like the majority of the movements we have been doing. So again, clean your trowel. There should not be any fat on at this stage. You're not picking up any plaster. You want the plaster to be fairly dry when you're doing this. You don't need to be pulling anything off the wall. Your wall is done, it's flat. We're just getting it nice. So clean off any wet areas in your trowel, come across again. And this is just polishing the wall. It helps to give the plaster a uniform texture, uniform colour, and it just helps to bind it all together and polish it up nicely. So, trick is keep cleaning your trowel, wet up your brush, go across, and again. And keep going as low as you can. until you've done the whole wall. That is how simple the wet trowel is. There's not much to it, but it's very effective in polishing up the plaster that's there. Give that a few minutes and I'm going to show you the final stage of plastering. Let's go on to it. Plastering. It's the exact same thing as what we did before the wet trowel. It's called the dry trowel. We do the same thing with no water. So I've cleaned off the trowel, complete clean, there's no fat on there. And then we go to the top. Doing the exact same thing as before, but with a dry trowel. Any moisture that collects, wipe it off, go again. It just gives that wall that final polish. Let me show you. If you look down, dialing up. And that is it. That is how you completely renovate your old walls. Take off the wallpaper, prep the background, and then completely plaster it. That is the full process. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, please subscribe to our channel, but more importantly, if you want to take this further and then explore the world of plaster, this is a very brief rundown on what to do. But if you want to break through and you want a breakdown of every stage and how to do it specifically, then feel free to join our free welcome course from Plastering Beginners. I'll show you the full process of plastering where we'll go into this but break each stage down and make it easy to understand and easy for you to recreate. So if you want to do that, hit the link below this video. Should be something flying about here. But otherwise, for more videos, just subscribe to our channel and you keep getting content like this every week. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Blaine Gray. See you on the next one. Cheers.